Hi everyone, this is Arpad from StarPath Academy. And in one of my recent short videos, I asked you to provide me with questions, or rather ask me some questions. What would you like to know about post-Soviet Romania and the high inflationary period that followed after? Mostly about the regular life of average citizens, and you delivered. So we have a lot of questions, and I'm going to do a series of videos trying to answer some of these questions. And I'm going to, if you haven't asked any questions yet, then I'll have a link where you can ask some more questions. Or if you're a member on Patreon or buy me a coffee, you can always ask questions. However, let's just take a couple of these questions, one video at a time, and let's name the series something like Life Under Hyperinflation or Life During High Inflation, or well, actually help me in the comment section to name the series something. This is the first episode. So I'm going to take some questions and let's go by what's more popular, at least for now. So M. Sprague asks, I would like to know more what people did for fun and how they managed to keep their spirits up. Very interesting question. So as with most of my answers, I'm trying to give you a little bit of context so you can understand what was the basic situation or the general feeling of Romanians where we were heading as a country. So the period that I'm talking about is basically the 90s. And prior to the 90s, we had communism. When communism fell in 89, there was this huge burst of optimism and positive feeling, I guess, that people had, right? So we have to take that into effect because at least for maybe a couple of months or maybe even more, we had this burst of optimism that people were looking forward to this new life of democracy or whatever would be following, right? So we had a very repressive regime that people had enough of. And coming out of that, we already had this kind of our spirits up, so to say. Now, of course, that didn't last long, especially in hyperinflation. However, it's very important to know that. The other thing to note is that communism, while everywhere where it has been implemented, it has first the taste of that country, the taste of that culture, and then communism applied on top of that. So Romania had Romanian communism, Russia had Russian communism, the Chinese have Chinese communism, and the Koreans have Korean style communism. But the culture of Romania was passed through, now modified by communism a lot. However, it has been passing through communism. And in that culture, we always had a strong community sense. And communism actually had to play on this. And they did it for many reasons, but many positive things came out of it because they built on I should say, the closeness of the Romanian people and the small Romanian towns that existed back then, right? So even then we had a lot of community centers and a lot of community activities that we had during communism, which it's sad to say that they have been kind of got it out, right? Many good things have went away as well. But that was there, right? That was in there, and that was kind of in communism. Now, after that, we didn't have the infrastructure, but the feeling for community was still there. And actually, it became much stronger now because you didn't have to fear from your neighbor that they would, you know, they would spill the beans that you are thinking freely, God forbid, or you're not kind of putting Ceausescu as a deity up there, right? So a lot of people were afraid of each other. While we had these kind of community centers and all of that during communism, there was always this underlying fear. Actually, if you think about it, life wasn't that bad compared to some other countries, right? like third world countries or something like that we still have today. So life wasn't that bad in Romania. What people had enough of was more that they couldn't be themselves, and they were always under the pressure and always afraid of their government. That at that point they break, and they just said that's enough, and we have nothing to lose because we already lost everything if we have lost our freedom. So that was, I know, a big detour, but you have to know about what was really happening, right? So now going back to answering your question, what did people do? Well, first and foremost, we got together a lot. That was for multiple reasons. One of the reasons was, of course, that we had to work together to survive, right? So in many of my examples, I say that what we did in these cases, we came out of the cities into smaller towns where we knew the community, where maybe it was your grandmother living there, your parents living there, or your cousins living there, right? So the community was stronger, even stronger in the smaller towns. And that was very important. So we had to work together in order to work the fields. Let's say on every odd days, we would work on someone's field, and everybody would come together and work on this field, and so on and so on. So just to give you an example, in our case, on the homestead that I have been talking about on this channel, it was my uncle, my cousin, my aunt, my mother, my sister, my father, myself, who was always there, then another cousin, plus the cousin's wife, plus their children was always coming there. So it was mostly, this was the more tightly knit community. But then, as I said, I had 10 cousins and I was the youngest one. So we were always traveling, going back and forth, working for someone. And usually at the end of the week, we would celebrate that. Well, the achievements were always celebrated in one way or another. And that had the positive effect of keeping the spirit up, right? And by celebration, you have to think about somebody organized. Usually it was my grandmother or someone else, or the person who we worked for that week, right? Organizing basically more formal dinner or some sort. So think of like the American typical barbecue, but of course we didn't have meat or anything like that, or definitely not that much. It was more about, okay, now we prepare some food from eggs, or maybe a chicken soup, right? The chicken soup that we had that week or that month, right? So that was sort of a celebration, because the other days we would eat bread with lard or something like that, right? So, but then we had the chicken soup, so that was a celebration, right? The other things we had, of course, homemade wine, homemade brandy. A lot of people did that. We did it as well. My uncle did that. So we always had that. But also, I mean, I was young, so I didn't really drink. But we had syrup. So it was syrup made from raspberries, some other berries, and so on and so forth. That was always like packed away, made into a syrup with sugar and so on. So we would dilute that with water. If we had the capability to have carbonated water, then that would be perfect. Or you had like the carbonated tanks, the carbon tanks that you can, CO2 tanks that you can use to carbonate it. That's actually pretty good investment if you like bubbly water. So we would have those types of things, and that is usually how we would celebrate, with food, with drinks, with coming together, but now celebrating the work that we did, right? And that had, I think that really was the most essential. If anything, that carried us through, because it gave us the sense of community. It gave us that we have a reason to go forward, to help each other, right? So I think that was probably the most important one, right? But we always made up some reason to celebrate. If it wasn't the butchering of the pig, then it was somebody's birthday. If it wasn't somebody's birthday, then it was somebody getting married, or we when we lived in the city, because we were moving back and forth, right? Um, so in the city, we Romania has these blocks, right? These communist blocks, these huge 10-story buildings with usually 40 or families or 80 families or 120 families in one of these blocks, tiny, tiny apartments. And you would know your neighbors, and they would have maybe they had the butchering of the pig or something like that. And then they would invite you over to have kostolo, something like, okay, the tasting, right? And you would, or maybe someone else had a birthday. So you kind of make up these reasons, and the celebration wasn't very lush, right? But it was a celebration, was a cause to get together and enjoy ourselves. So that, I think that was the most important piece of it. Now, other ways how we would keep the spirits up was actually sports. We played a lot of soccer or volley. So we played that whenever we could. We did have all of these sport complexes or whatever that were built during communism. That was actually one of the positives of communism. They did, at least in Romania, they did spend a lot of money on sports and that sort of stuff. So we had that, but to be honest, they were already crumbling by that time. So we just played on the field or in the mud or something like that. And yeah, I remember at one point, it was 10 of us, right? 10 of us plus my father, who just donated some money. So we pulled the money together and we bought a soccer ball, right? And it was actually from through Russia. It might have been from China, I don't know, but it was like the soccer ball that we had, right? So we pulled some money together and we were able to afford the soccer ball that way, right? So we played a lot of that. Other sports we did, but also boxing and many other sports. So it was again sort of sense of community where we got together and celebrated and had an event, right? That was again very important. So I think that would be the most important. The other thing was that grandmothers grandmothers made the life much easier, at least in our case, because they actually went through much harder times, from the Second World War to early communism, which was very bad, then sort of okay communism to Guyash communism to Ceausescu communism to now hyperinflation. And it was just like another wave in their lives. So they could keep the spirits up fairly easily with a lot of stories, right? And that sort of stuff. We listened to that. We didn't have television, right? Our family didn't. One of our relatives eventually was able to buy one. And you probably know the story about that. But a lot of stories, reading books, or it was maybe my father reading stories or telling stories for my sister and I. And we would be like sitting under the chestnut tree at night after we worked on the field or something like that, and kind of spending time together. So that was always good. People kind of over exaggerate the alcohol and that sort of stuff. It was there, but it wasn't keeping anyone's spirit up, to be honest. It was actually just ruining families. It was really ruining families, and it was horrible. So many cases, you kind of you have these jokes about, oh, those Russians or Romanians or whoever are drinking that much. Well, they were drinking because that was their escape. But if people did that, it was more of an escape. It wasn't for keeping spirits up. It was to deal with the pains of life. So these were more like the major ones that can come to my mind. However, I do have to tell that it was hard. There was a lot of suicides and a lot of bad things happening for sure, and people abusing substances, mostly alcohol, but possibly other things as well. So it wasn't the situation wasn't rosy, but kind of we compensated with time being spent together. Right. So I do want to say another thing, that we were always busy. It wasn't like now that you would have time. I mean, we still are, right? We still are busy, but a lot of people use, from what I can tell, right, use their time to watch shows on Netflix, or maybe doing too much YouTube, or just, from at least my perspective, wasting a lot of time. And I think that brings some kind of sadness into the life of many people, whether they know or don't know. I think that, at least that's my opinion. And being busy and always working on something keeps your mind off of bad things, for probably good things as well. But you have to focus on something. And we were always doing something. It was always someone's house we had to fix, or do the dishes, or do this, or wash with your hands, or go to the river and wash the um, rugs, or we were always busy. So making sure that you're busy and enjoying the fruit of your labor is actually will keep your spirits up, I believe. I definitely believe that. I mean, just finish your project, just start the garden project, or build some outdoor furniture, or do whatever you like, and you will feel so much more fulfilled than watching binge watching some shows or something like that. So yeah, mostly more things will come to my mind, but I think these were the major ones. The other thing were kind of that you had the entrepreneurial spirit coming back right after the fall of communism, and a lot of people were trying to kind of get ahead in this new environment. And there was a lot of positivity going around for the people who tried to make the most of this newly found freedom. So I think that was very important as well. And family, just being with family all the time. I think that was the most important part. All right, so I think that is for this video, but we can come back to this question later on if you guys would like to know more. Thanks.